Saltburn has been out for a couple of weeks now, and after giving it a few watches, the dust has settled and I realised that there was one major burning question that was left out there which was never really answered in the film, and that was if Ollie actually had true feelings of love for Felix. With there being a couple of different perspectives on this, I thought I'd share both sides of the argument and then provide the answer that I think is most likely. So let's get into it. Here is, was Ollie actually in love with Felix in Saltburn? Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Let's start by looking at the idea and the argument that Ollie didn't love Felix and his actions were based on meticulous planning and pure obsession, not love. So whilst it might initially be easy to sit there and think that Ollie was deeply in love with Felix and obsessed with him because he cared about him, that feels like it's merely the surface level of what we saw, and there was more going on inside of Ollie's head. The so-called love that we saw for Felix wasn't the love for him, but it was the love for everything that he stood for, and everything that Ollie stood to gain by being near him and within his inner circle. Ollie had never experienced the type of life that Felix had. They were complete opposites. Ollie was unpopular, didn't have any friends, as he said to Felix that he was his first true friend. He came from a middle-class background and was often forgotten or ignored when in a room. But by being around Felix, it transformed his life completely, and he knew that by being around him, there stood a lot to be gained in terms of societal status and also wealth. Hence why we saw Ollie's master plan getting put to work, and we found out that he'd been planning this all along when he first laid eyes on Felix across the university courtyard in the first moments of the film, ensuring that he ended up alongside Felix. This to me is obviously one of the main reasons which shows that Ollie wasn't in love with Felix. He was just obsessed with the idea of having a life like Felix, mirroring him and having what he had. He desired the status, attention, power and wealth, mostly because it was the lack of that very thing that made him an outsider and caused other people to judge him because of it. So his pure obsession with his endgame, which was the Saltburn estate and the 17-year-long plan that he had, far outweighed any feelings of love or sentimentality that he had towards Felix. There was an obsession there with Felix for sure. He slurped his dirty bathwater, stuck his snake in the dirt above his coffin and bawled his eyes out. But I think those moments were done for different reasons, not for love. He was slurping the water because there was a physical attraction there, there's no denying that. But I feel mentally, within that moment, he felt as though he was consuming a part of Felix so that he almost had what he had inside of him. Something which I imagine made him feel more like him and like it just drank some of that aura that Felix had. Plus, what happened at the grave was something that I think was done because I feel it was Ollie mourning the fact that the person that he was obsessed with was gone. We didn't see him have this reaction with anybody else in the family once they died, and this was because he wasn't obsessed with them. Felix was almost like Ollie's toy, and the fact that he could mentally play with him and feel like he had one up on him due to the lies that he was telling and the fact that he was carrying out his master plan successfully. So with Felix being dead and Ollie being the person who almost had to ruin the fun part of his plan, which was Felix, I feel he was just upset over that, rather than the fact that he'd lost somebody that he had true feelings of love for. Let's also remember, at the same time that he was supposedly in love with Felix and had feelings for him, he was manipulating everybody else around him. He was intimate with Venetia, Felix's sister, and then lied to Felix about it. And he also ambushed Farley in bed one night and manipulated him in an intimate way. Something which you wouldn't do if you had true feelings for somebody and actually cared about them. Ollie was a psychopath, and as I said in a previous video, is described as a gain killer, as he stood to gain a lot by everybody being dead. And his motives were mission-oriented, so he perfectly aligns with a certain category of serial killer. So yeah, based on this evidence, I think it's clear to see that Felix was just a pawn in Ollie's game. An important one, as he was the bridge to get to where he needed to be. And whilst he wasn't in love with Felix, I feel he just loved everything that he stood for, and what he stood to gain because of him. Oh yeah, and let's also look at the obvious thing here. Ollie killed Felix without even thinking about it, so surely that's not true love. Now let's take a look at the other side, where Ollie could have been deeply in love with Felix. So even after everything that I just mentioned in the previous section, where it seemed like true love was the last thing that was on Ollie's mind, there's still the chance that he could have had those feelings for him. When we take a look at the events that occurred in the final third of the movie, the main reason as to why Ollie killed Felix was because he was told that he had to leave Saltburn because of him, and the fact that he found out that Ollie had essentially lied about his entire life in order to get close to him and the family. If the secret wasn't revealed at that moment in time, we most likely wouldn't have seen Felix be killed in the way that he was. At that moment, Ollie's actions were a reaction to the prospect of losing the very thing that he wanted most, which was the lifestyle and the Saltburn estate. There were feelings from Ollie towards Felix in terms of attraction, as you could see that Ollie was interested in him in that way. So maybe Ollie's initial plan was to be good enough friends with Felix, maybe even try to get into a relationship with him so that he'd be able to get Saltburn that way. Rather than killing him and his entire family off, he may have wanted to have had the lifestyle of the mega rich, the thing that he'd never experienced, but with a partner alongside him. And that could have been Felix. But because of the surprise that Felix carried out by taking Ollie to see his parents and it all being uncovered, he knew that if he didn't kill Felix, then there'd be no chance of being able to go along with the master plan, and it all being for nothing. We did see Ollie crying and looking upset after Felix had died, and we even heard Ollie say to Felix that he loved him when they were having their disagreements in the center of the Saltburn labyrinth. So whilst it could have all just been master manipulation, there could have actually been some truth behind it. Whilst there's not as much evidence for the fact that Ollie could have actually loved Felix, there is still some evidence and an argument, which must count for something, right? So did Ollie love Felix? After taking both arguments into consideration, personally, I don't think that Ollie was in love with Felix. I think he loved Felix to the point where he was obsessed with him, but I don't feel there were feelings of true love or care that were there. Ollie killed Felix the first moment that he felt like his master plan was going to fail and his secret would be revealed. Even though Ollie said that he loved Felix, I don't think that he did. Ollie handed Felix the poison bottle when he said those words to him, so it could have just been a way of making Felix feel like there was nothing suspicious going on with the intention of luring him into a false sense of security. Ollie was just obsessed with Felix and he wanted the life that he led, and he knew that the only way that he'd get it was by being close to him and worming his way in. I don't think he would have settled down with Felix or have been friends to the point where Felix would have just let him live there. He poisoned that bottle pretty quickly after his cover was nearly blown to the family and he was told to leave, which makes me think that it was always Ollie's plan to kill the entire family and end up with the Saltburn estate in that way, without Felix. Felix threatening to reveal Ollie's true life only accelerated the process and made his death come quicker. So, no, I don't think Ollie was in love with Felix. He just loved the life that he had and the presence, aura, and everything that he attracted towards him. And I just think he simply wanted a piece. In fact, all of it. He wanted to become it. So, there you have it. Was Ollie actually in love with Felix in Saltburn? If you want to see more videos on Saltburn, such as the bathtub scene explained, the grave scene explained, the movie compared to the talented Mr. Ripley, and even a full breakdown, then click on the card in the top corner. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. Do you think Ollie was in love with Felix? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.